Hello, today we're going to talk about solving one-step inequalities using addition or subtraction. Here's your notes page. Make sure everything that I write, you write down on your notes page. And solving an inequality is very similar to solving an equation. It's actually almost exactly the same. The only thing is you're going to be asked to graph the inequality. So, let's take a look. For this first example, we have -7 is less than or equal to x plus 7. So just like you would on an equation, you want to get your variable all by itself. In order to get your variable all by itself, you need to get rid of what on this problem? The add 7. The inverse of an add 7 would be to subtract 7. Whatever you do to one side of your inequality, you do to the other. Okay, on the right side here, +7, -7 cancels out, and I am left with, on the right side here, x, bring down your inequality symbol, -7 minus 7 is -14. Now, as I said to you in the last unit, before I graph that, I am going to rewrite that with my variable on the left. So that would be rewritten as x, I'm going to read it backwards, is greater than or equal to -14. Okay, when I graph this on the number line, and when I put those numbers on the number line, I always put the number that I'm graphing in the middle of the number line. And if you notice, you don't have to number every single number line as long as it's to scale. So I have the -14 in the middle there, and then I counted every other one, but I'm technically counting by ones. Now for this number line, it is including the -14. Because it is greater than or equal to. So I'm going to do a closed circle on my -14, and it would be everything greater than -14, so it's all the numbers to the right of -14. And I'm going to make that line real bold so it's obvious, and everything to the right when I graph that. Okay, the next one, I have x plus 14 is greater than or equal to 12. We're going to solve that just like we solve an equation. I'm going to get x all by itself. I have to get rid of that add 14, so I am going to subtract 14. Whatever I do to one side of the inequality, I have to do to the other. Okay, +14, -14 cancels out. I am left with x is greater than or equal to 12 minus 14. I have different signs. Subtract. 14 minus 12 is 2, and it would be a -2 because 14 is the bigger number. There's your answer. And I could just leave that like that because my variable is already written on the left. Okay, now I'm going to number my number line. So I have -2 right in the middle, and then I'm going to count by every other one. So this would be a -1, and then this would be a 0. And then if I go this way, this would be -3, so this would be a -4. Okay, and this would be a greater than or equal to, so it includes -2 when I graph that. Is this different color, and it's greater than or equal to, so it's everything to the right. And make that arrow real obvious. Okay, at any time if you need to pause to catch up, you should do that. Next problem, we have -36 is greater than x minus 18. Now you may choose to rewrite it with your variable automatically on the left, but I choose to do that at the very end so I don't make any mistakes. My goal is to get x all by itself. To get x by itself, I need to get rid of a subtract 18 The inverse of subtracting 18 is to add 18. Whatever I do to one side of the inequality, I have to do to the other. It's very similar to equation solving. Negative 18, positive 18 cancels out. I'm going to bring down my x and my symbol as is, and negative 36 plus 18, I have different signs, so I'm going to subtract, and I get 18, and that would be a negative 18 because 36 is the bigger number. I am going to rewrite that with my variable on the left and read it backwards. X is less than negative 18. So that's the inequality that I'm graphing. Looking at my number line, I have my negative 18 will go right in the middle. This would be negative 17, so this is negative 16. And then on the opposite way, I have negative 19. This will be negative 20. And you definitely want to put a couple different numbers on those number lines. Okay, and I have a open circle because it's less than, not equal to, 18. And it's less than, so it's everything to the left. Okay, next one we have 8 is less than or equal to x minus 2. I want to get my variable all by itself, and to do that I'm going to get rid of that minus 2. The inverse of a subtract 2 is to add 2. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. Negative 2 plus 2 cancels out. And I'm left with x is greater than or equal to 8 plus 2 is 10. Okay, now I'm going to rewrite that so that my variable is on the left. So that would be x is greater than or equal to 10. And now I'll graph that inequality. We have 10, that would be 11, this would be 12. And when I go down, that's 9, and that's 8. And that would be a closed circle because it's greater than or equal to 10. And it's greater than or equal to, so it's everything to the right. Okay, taking a look at number 5. Again, if you need to pause and catch up, you should do that. Okay, on number 5, I have x plus 1/3 is greater than negative 3. I'm going to get rid of that add 1/3, so the inverse of an add 1/3 is to subtract 1/3. Whatever I do to one side of the inequality, I have to do to the other. Now, technically, you could find your common denominator here, but if you could just add that mentally, which you should be able to do, I have x is greater than negative 3 and a negative 1/3. You have same signs. Add them together. That would be a negative 3 and 1/3 is your answer. Okay. Now graphing that, this is pretty tricky for me because of the pen on the stylus on this, but it would be negative 3 and 1/3. I could put right in the middle there. And then I'm going to skip the next line. Now I have to count, I'm going to count by a third for every single one. So this would be a negative 3. This would be a negative 2 and 2/3. Okay, when I go the opposite way, this would be negative 3 and 2/3. So this would be a negative 4. Okay, and that would be an open circle, and it's greater than negative 3 and 1/3. So I'm going to shade that to the right. Okay, and numbering the number line, you got to make sure you do that properly. Be careful there. Okay, number 6, I have a negative 3 and 1/10. is greater than or equal to x plus 2 4/10. Okay, I want to get x all by itself, so to do that, I need to get rid of that add 2 4/10, so I'm going to subtract 2 4/10. If you prefer to move the decimals, you can, but I wouldn't recommend that just yet until we learn 2 steps. Okay, and I'm going to subtract 2 4/10 on both sides. Oops. My 2 4/10 cancels out here. I am left with x. Bring down my symbol. On this side I have same sign, so I'm going to add. 4 plus 1 is 5. 3 plus 2 is 5. Bring down your decimal. Make sure you line up your decimals. And my bigger number is negative, so that will be a negative. And there's my answer. Okay, now I'm going to graph my number line. So I have negative 5.5. And I'm going to count by halves. So if that's negative 5.5, this would be negative 5. This would be negative 4.5. And then if I go this way, this would be negative 6. This would be negative 6.5. Okay, and that would be a closed circle on 5.5. And it's greater than, so it's everything to the right. Okay. If you have any questions, make sure you write them down so you can ask them. And this last question, it says, a person must be no taller than 56 inches tall to ride the space cars at Great Adventure. Ryan is 4 feet tall. Write and solve an inequality that represents how much Ryan can still grow and still ride the space cars at Great Adventure. Okay, so we have one little issue here. This is 56 inches and this is 4 feet. So first we have to change that because you cannot have inches and feet and compare that way. So off the top of your head, 4 feet, well, there's 12 inches in 1 foot, so 4 feet would be 12 times 4, which is 48 inches. Okay, so knowing that, we have, so far, Ryan is 48 inches. He can still grow because he's not yet 56 inches, but we want to know how much he can grow. But I don't know that number, so I'm going to use a variable. Well, it would be 48 plus I don't know. And we need to get to no taller than. So this number cannot be any bigger than 56. So it could be less than or equal to. And that would be your inequality. 48 plus x, is less than or equal to 56. Okay, let's go ahead and solve that inequality. Now it doesn't say we have to graph it, we just have to solve it. So I'm going to get my variable all by itself. In order to do that, I need to get rid of the positive 48, so I'm going to subtract 48. Whatever I do on one side, I do to the other. My 48s cancel out. I'm left with x, bring down my inequality symbol, and 56 minus 48 is 8. So x is less than or equal to 8. And we should label that, always on a word problem, inches. Okay, if you have any questions, write them down. Have a great night.